Most people believe poverty is a wall, a massive, immovable structure built by the economy, by the government, by bad luck, by family background. They see it as something external, something imposed, something that requires miracles to escape. But what if the wall is not made of concrete? What if it is made of perception, behavior, and strategy? The uncomfortable truth is this: escaping poverty is not easy emotionally, but it is structurally simple. Simple does not mean comfortable. Simple does not mean quick. Simple means the path is clear. But most refuse to walk it because it demands psychological transformation. Poverty, for many, is not just a financial condition. It is an identity. An identity is harder to break than circumstance. If you grow up hearing people like us don't get rich, your nervous system adapts to that belief. If you constantly see scarcity, you begin to operate from survival mode. Survival mode narrows thinking. It prioritizes short-term relief over long-term gain. When your brain is in survival mode, it seeks certainty, not growth. It avoids risk, even calculated risk. It chooses familiarity over opportunity. This is where the first strategic shift begins. Escaping poverty requires abandoning emotional attachment to your current identity. You must be willing to outgrow the version of yourself that survived scarcity. That is painful, because your habits are familiar, your social circle is familiar, your excuses are familiar, and familiarity feels safe. But safety and growth rarely coexist. Most people trapped in poverty focus on income. They obsess over small increases in hourly pay. They argue about minimum wage. They wait for external systems to change. Meanwhile, they ignore leverage. Leverage is the multiplier of effort. There are only a few forms of leverage in the modern world: skills, capital, networks, and media. If you rely purely on physical labor, your income ceiling is limited by time and energy. If you develop rare skills, your income scales with value, not hours. But developing rare skills requires delayed gratification, and delayed gratification feels like loss in the short term. The mind of scarcity asks, "How can I make money this week?" The mind of strategy asks, "What skill, if mastered over 2 years, makes me difficult to replace?" That difference in question changes trajectory. Most people want immediate relief from financial pressure, so they take short-term jobs that keep them busy but do not increase their market value. Busy is not the same as progressing. You can work 60 hours a week and remain stuck if none of those hours increase your leverage. The strategic approach is uncomfortable at first. It may require working a basic job while investing evenings into learning something difficult: coding, sales, digital marketing, high-value trades, negotiation, content creation, financial literacy. It may require sacrificing entertainment, sacrificing social validation, sacrificing comfort. But here's the reality few admit. Poverty is expensive. It costs mental energy. It costs stress. It costs options. And escaping it requires trading short-term pleasure for long-term power. There is a psychological trap that keeps many stuck: comparison within the same environment. If everyone around you struggles financially, your struggle feels normal. Normal reduces urgency. You adapt to mediocrity because it does not feel like failure. It feels average. To escape, you must intentionally expose yourself to different standards, different circles, different expectations. Environment influences ambition more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Environment conditions. If you spend time around people who discuss investments, growth, strategy, and opportunity, your thinking shifts, not instantly, gradually. Your brain begins to normalize higher targets. Normalization is powerful. What once felt impossible starts to feel attainable. Another uncomfortable truth: escaping poverty requires ruthless prioritization. You cannot afford to scatter your energy across distractions. Every dollar and every hour must be evaluated strategically. Does this expense move me forward? Does this habit increase my earning potential? Does this relationship expand or shrink my vision? This level of self-questioning feels intense. It feels almost cold, but it creates clarity. Clarity eliminates waste, and waste is a luxury poverty cannot afford. One of the biggest misconceptions is that wealth begins with money. It does not. It begins with control. Control over time. Control over focus. Control over emotion. If you cannot control impulses, you will sabotage financial growth. Impulse spending. Impulse quitting. Impulse reacting to criticism. Financial growth is boring in the beginning. There is no applause for saving small amounts consistently. There is no immediate reward for studying after a long shift. Here is no celebration for saying no to unnecessary purchases. But compounding works quietly. Small skill improvements compound. Small savings compound. Small network expansions compound. Most people underestimate compounding because results are invisible early on. The first months feel slow. The first year feels insignificant. Then momentum builds. Another psychological barrier is entitlement, believing the world owes you wealth because you work hard. Effort does not equal value. Value equals value. The market rewards problem solving, not struggle. You can struggle intensely in a low-demand field and remain underpaid. Or you can strategically position yourself where demand exceeds supply. The question becomes, what problems are people willing to pay significant money to solve? If you learn to solve expensive problems, your income changes. Expensive problems require skill. Skill requires repetition. Repetition requires discipline. Discipline requires emotional regulation. Everything returns to psychology. Many people attempt to escape poverty through intensity bursts. They feel inspired. They work obsessively for 2 weeks. Then exhaustion hits. Old habits return. Sustainable strategy beats emotional intensity. You do not need to be extreme. You need to be consistent. Consistency is unglamorous, but it separates trajectory from stagnation. Another hidden factor is pride. Pride prevents learning. Pride prevents starting small. Pride prevents asking questions. If you are too proud to take an entry-level position in a high-growth field, you may remain in a stagnant one longer. Sometimes escaping poverty requires temporary humility. You may need to accept being a beginner, being underestimated, being unknown. That stage feels uncomfortable for the ego, but it is strategic positioning. Positioning determines probability. You can dramatically increase your odds by placing yourself where growth is likely. Location matters. Industry matters. Skill relevance matters. Complaining about macroeconomics while ignoring micro decisions is a distraction. You cannot control global systems fully, but you can control your learning trajectory. You can control your spending habits. You can control your information diet. Information diet is critical. If you consume constant narratives of hopelessness, corruption, and limitation, your brain internalizes defeat. If you consume strategy, opportunity, and case studies of upward mobility, your brain searches for patterns to replicate. The mind looks for evidence supporting what it repeatedly hears. Feed it possibility, and it searches for doors. Feed it limitation, and it searches for excuses. Escaping poverty is simpler than they tell you because the mechanics are straightforward. Increase your value. Control your expenses. Invest consistently. Expand your network strategically. Repeat. What complicates the process is emotion, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of leaving familiar environments, fear of losing social approval. Sometimes your growth threatens those around you. If you begin thinking differently, acting differently, investing differently, you may be labeled arrogant or unrealistic. Social pressure is powerful. Humans are wired for belonging. Belonging to a group that normalizes struggle can anchor you to struggle. At some point, you must choose growth over approval. That choice feels lonely, but loneliness during transition is temporary. Stagnation is permanent. There is also the myth of overnight transformation. Social media distorts timelines. You see someone wealthy at 28 and assume rapid ascent. You rarely see the years of obscurity, learning, rejection, and disciplined investment. This distortion creates impatience. Impatience leads to risky shortcuts. Shortcuts often reset progress. Patience is underrated leverage. If you commit to a 5-year strategic plan, most people will drop out before year 3. Simply staying focused longer than others gives you advantage. Longevity outperforms bursts. You must also develop a relationship with discomfort. Discomfort is not a sign you are failing. It is often a sign you are expanding. Learning complex skills feels frustrating. Budgeting feels restrictive. Saying no to impulsive spending feels limiting. But these micro discomforts create macro freedom. Freedom is the delayed reward. Many people want freedom immediately. True freedom is built gradually. Another key principle is separating identity from current circumstance. Being poor is a situation. It is not your identity unless you internalize it. If you constantly say, "I'm broke," "I'm unlucky," "I'm just not good with money," you reinforce neural pathways of limitation. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. Change the internal narrative, and behavior begins to shift. Instead of, "I can't afford this," ask, "How can I afford this?" The second question activates creativity. The first shuts it down. Creativity increases opportunity. Opportunity increases income. The shift seems small, but small cognitive shifts compound. Escaping poverty also requires learning basic financial mechanics: interest, debt structures, asset versus liability, cash flow. Many remain trapped simply because they were never taught these fundamentals. Financial ignorance is costly, but ignorance can be corrected. In the modern world, information is accessible. Excuses are less defensible. Time will pass regardless. The question is whether you use it intentionally. If you spend 5 years distracted, you remain where you are. If you spend 5 years focused on skill acquisition and disciplined investing, your position changes dramatically. 5 years feels long, but poverty over a lifetime is longer. There will be setbacks, unexpected expenses, failures, rejections. Strategic thinking does not eliminate difficulty. It prepares you for it. When a setback occurs, the reactive mind says, "See, this never works for me." The strategic mind says, "Adjust." Adjustment preserves momentum. Momentum is critical. If you lose momentum emotionally, you lose trajectory. Protect your momentum at all costs. Even small daily progress maintains psychological movement. Movement reduces despair. Despair paralyzes. Paralysis prolongs poverty. The path is not glamorous. It is methodical. It requires internal restructuring before external results appear. That is why most quit early. They do not see immediate transformation and assume it is impossible. But structural change is slow at first. Then it accelerates. Your first investment returns may be small. Your first skill-based income increase may be modest. But each improvement raises your baseline. Higher baseline changes future decisions. As your income rises, you must resist lifestyle inflation. That is another trap. If every raise is matched by increased spending, progress stalls. Discipline at higher income levels accelerates escape. Escaping poverty is not about one big breakthrough. It is about consistent strategic alignment. Daily decisions aligned with long-term vision. It is simple, not easy. Simple means the formula is clear. Increase value, control emotion, leverage time, invest consistently, ignore noise, repeat longer than others are willing to. And in the second part, we will go deeper into the advanced layers: power positioning, strategic networking, calculated risk, and how to build asymmetric opportunities that compress years of struggle into focused acceleration. Now we move into the level most people never reach. Because the first phase is discipline, the second phase is positioning. Discipline builds stability. Positioning builds acceleration. If you only focus on working harder, you may improve your situation slowly. But if you understand positioning, you can compress time. You can multiply results without multiplying effort. Positioning is about being in the right place with the right skill at the right moment. Most people think opportunity is random. It is not random. It flows toward visibility, relevance, and proximity. Visibility means people know what you can do. Relevance means what you can do solves a current demand. Proximity means you are close to decision makers or ecosystems where value circulates. You can be talented and remain poor if no one sees you. You can work hard and remain stuck if your skill is outdated. You can be capable and remain overlooked if you isolate yourself from opportunity hubs. Escaping poverty becomes dramatically easier when you intentionally design these three factors. First, visibility. In the modern world, obscurity is optional. You can document your learning process, share insights, build a small but focused digital presence around your skill. Write, record, teach, analyze. You do not need millions of followers. You need strategic visibility. If 500 people in your niche recognize your competence, opportunities begin to appear. Visibility creates surface area for luck. Luck is often preparation meeting exposure. If no one knows you exist, your probability remains low. Second, relevance. The market rewards solutions to urgent problems. Study demand before committing years to mastering something. Ask yourself, is this skill growing in demand or shrinking? Automation is replacing some roles. Technology is creating others. Adaptation is survival. Rigid attachment to outdated industries keeps many trapped. Strategic individuals watch trends carefully, not emotionally, objectively. They position themselves slightly ahead of mainstream adoption. When demand rises, they are already competent. That timing creates leverage. Third, proximity. If everyone around you earns minimum wage, your conversations revolve around survival. If you spend time around entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and high-level professionals, your thinking expands. Proximity shifts standards. Standards shift performance. You do not have to abandon your roots, but you must expand your exposure. Attend events. Join online communities. Offer value. Ask intelligent questions. Do not enter rooms asking for money. Enter asking how you can contribute. Contribution builds credibility. Credibility builds trust. Trust builds opportunity. Now we reach a more uncomfortable truth. Escaping poverty requires calculated risk. Safety maintains survival. Risk creates growth, but reckless risk destroys stability. The difference is information. Calculated risk is based on research, skill preparation, and downside management. For example, Starting a business without savings, without research, without a skill advantage is gambling. Building a skill for 2 years, saving capital, understanding your market, and then launching is calculated. Calculated risk increases asymmetry. Asymmetry means potential upside far exceeds downside. If you invest $1,000 in learning a high-demand skill that can increase your income by $20,000 annually, the asymmetry is clear. If you risk social discomfort by networking, and that exposure leads to a career shift doubling your income, the emotional downside was small compared to financial upside. Strategic thinkers constantly evaluate asymmetry. They avoid low upside, high risk moves. They pursue high upside, controlled risk moves. This mental model accelerates progress. Another advanced principle is controlling narrative. How people perceive you influences opportunity flow. If you present yourself as desperate, overwhelmed, and uncertain, high-level opportunities avoid you. If you present yourself as disciplined, improving, and focused, even if you are early in your journey, perception shifts. Perception shapes access. Access shapes income. This does not mean faking success. It means embodying direction. Direction attracts allies. No one wants to invest in confusion. People invest in momentum. Momentum can exist before wealth. If you are clearly improving, clearly consistent, clearly serious, people notice. Opportunities often appear gradually, then suddenly, but they rarely appear for those drifting without intention. Now consider power positioning. Power is not domination, it is optionality. When you have savings, skills, and networks, you can say no. The ability to say no is wealth. When you cannot say no to toxic work, unfair pay, or exploitative dynamics, you are constrained. Every financial step should increase your ability to choose. Choice reduces stress. Reduced stress improves decision-making. Better decisions increase income. It becomes a positive cycle. But here is the psychological trap at this stage. Ego inflation. As income rises, identity can shift too fast. You may overspend to signal success. You may become complacent. You may stop learning. Growth stalls the moment you believe you have arrived. Wealth building is not an event. It is a system. Systems must be maintained. Continue upgrading skills. Continue investing. Continue building relationships. Continue studying markets. Complacency invites regression. Another key layer is strategic focus. Do not chase 10 opportunities at once. Select 1 or 2 high-leverage paths and commit deeply. Depth outperforms scattered effort. If you attempt trading, e-commerce, content creation, freelancing, and real estate simultaneously with minimal knowledge in each, you dilute energy. Mastery creates authority. Authority creates pricing power. Pricing power changes income dramatically. Specialization increases value. Generalization increases replaceability. Be careful where you place your ambition. Chasing status symbols before stability creates fragility. Chasing stability before status creates durability. Durability compounds. Now let us address emotional endurance. There will be moments when progress feels invisible, when effort seems disconnected from reward, when others appear to advance faster. Comparison during this phase is dangerous. Everyone's starting point differs. Everyone's exposure differs. Focus on trajectory, not speed. If your income, skill, and discipline are improving year over year, you are winning. Speed is seductive. Trajectory is strategic. Another powerful principle is monetizing knowledge. Every skill you acquire can be packaged. Consulting, coaching, digital products, services, employment leverage. Knowledge that remains private scales slowly. Knowledge shared strategically scales faster. Teaching forces clarity. Clarity increases mastery. Mastery increases income. You do not need to be the best in the world. You need to be ahead of someone willing to learn. That gap creates value. Also understand this. Money flows toward confidence backed by competence. Confidence without competence is noise. Competence without confidence is invisible. Develop both. Practice communication. Practice negotiation. Practice articulating value. Negotiation alone can increase lifetime income by hundreds of thousands. Most people never negotiate. They accept. Acceptance maintains limits. Negotiation expands them. Even small salary negotiations compound over decades. Small percentage increases become massive over time. Compounding applies everywhere. Income, skills, reputation, investments, relationships. Think long-term. The final advanced layer is ownership. As long as you only trade time for money, your growth is capped. Ownership can mean equity in a business. Ownership can mean digital assets. Ownership can mean investments that produce returns independent of hours worked. Ownership creates scalability. Scalability creates freedom. But ownership requires discipline first. You cannot build scalable assets if your financial base is unstable. Sequence matters. Stability, skill, savings, positioning, risk, ownership. When followed consistently, this sequence works far more often than people admit. The world is not perfectly fair. There are structural disadvantages. But within those constraints, strategic action dramatically shifts probability. The harsh reality is this. Many remain poor not because escape is impossible, but because the psychological cost of change feels higher than the pain of staying. Change demands identity shift, discipline, delayed gratification, strategic thinking, loneliness at times, risk. Most choose familiarity instead. But if you endure the transition, something changes internally. You stop seeing poverty as destiny. You start seeing it as a phase that ends when strategy, discipline, and positioning align. And once you cross that threshold, you realize something powerful. It was not magic. It was not luck alone. It was structured behavior repeated consistently. Escaping poverty is simpler than they tell you, because the mechanics are clear. What is rare is not the formula. What is rare is the willingness to execute it long enough for the results to become undeniable.